go. Hello, all. Welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh, and I have with me today a very special guest, Christopher G. Brenning. Christopher, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. So I'm sure you guys know by now that I love Christopher's book, The Hellborn King. If you have not seen me on Twitter, you should really get there because I share a lot of great books and authors like Christopher. Christopher, this is a question that somebody had asked me a long time ago when I first started the podcast, and everybody's really liked it since. So what has your writing journey been like up until this point? And I know it's kind of a loaded question for some people, but.
For me, it's pretty straightforward. I started writing as a hobby back in 2003. Found a site, online writing community by complete accident, stumbled into it, fell in love with it, started writing, got involved with more groups of people. And yeah, I did that actively until about 2012, kind of fell out of it for a little while. And then actually what inspired me to pick it up again was Game of Thrones coming to an end.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I've written just hundreds of thousands of words over the years, and just have refined my style gradually. And I actually pretty much had to completely learn how to write all over again for writing in book format. Totally different from like the online RPG community stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, that's how I started out. Just some rando guy on the internet, just putting words together. You know,
you hear that, guys? There's hope for us. Well, I've had a couple of conversations with you about that. So I just found it interesting, when you and I had talked about those kinds of things. And I don't know, it seemed to me like you and I had a similar background, because I'm probably going on 14 years now, probably like, I don't even know, 800, 900,000 words, something like that, just all random stuff. And I was like, if somebody can get a great book like you and do that and come from a similar background, I was like, there's hope for some of us on the internet. So
yeah, starting is the easiest part. Finishing is the most difficult.
Oh, amen to that. Amen to that. I've been saying that constantly all last year. My wife, she's like, how's it going? I'm like, I'm just trying to finish this one draft. I'm like, I finally got one draft finished, and now I'm like, okay, now I'll start the next draft. It's a very slow process, but yeah, finishing is definitely key. So yeah, that's good advice. I'm really curious, just to get right into the Hellborn King. I'm curious, what tools or strategies did you use to create such real characters with such relatable problems? And I'm thinking in particular, I don't even know. I think you could just pick any one of your characters. Einar, is a really good example. For those of you that haven't read The Hellborn King, I don't know. He's a very noble barbarian, I would describe him as, and he's my kind of guy. He's got a conscience. He's loyal. He's, having to fill a duty here with, following the Hellborn King and with Damien Dreadfire. And I don't know. But I feel like, without saying any spoilers, I just think that, you put him into some very interesting situations. And I don't know, being a history teacher, I find myself really seeing him in a lot of different scenarios. So I just was curious with characters like that, like how'd you do this? How'd you create such great characters with such relatable problems?
Well, half of the cast of characters I've already had since 2004.
Oh, wow.
The barbarians, so Damien Dreadfire, Einar, he had a different name at the time, Sylvia, like all those characters. So I already know them pretty intimately. But what I wanted to do with each character, and really it's the overall theme of the book, it's layers of conflict. So you have the big conflict, which is the war. You have the conflicts within the factions, and then you have the conflicts with the characters where they're dealing with external conflicts, like sibling rivalries, like with Gareth and Lucetta, and then their own inner struggles that they're dealing with. And sometimes what they're thinking is not what they're saying and doing. They have their own insecurities. And I just wanted to give every character an internal and external conflict. And so I just decided, well, what's that conflict going to be? So with Einar, I was actually stuck because when the book started out, like all the barbarians were just trying to one up each other to see who was most brutal. But I was like, this is just cartoonish. Nobody's going to relate to it. So I was like, what if I had a guy who, he's fiercely loyal, he's Damien's greatest champion, but he does not agree with what he's seeing around him. And he's torn between loyalty and his principles. And I thought, man, that's deep, and I can go a lot of directions with that. So I think for that character, I just picked the ball up and just ran with it from there. And you could see it pretty much from the first couple pages in his
Yeah,
chapter,
yeah,
his
yeah.
first chapter, where he's
Yeah.
just like, like he's like, so this is what war is, may the gods forgive me,
Yeah, yeah.
because he met Damien, he's sympathetic to what happened, I won't get into any spoilers. He's just torn, and you see that conflict play out chapter after chapter, and it just grinds him down, and it's fascinating to watch somebody go through that. And
Yeah.
I try to do that with each character. I try to have characters start up at the top, and slowly they get broken down, and characters that start broken down and they start rebuilding themselves, like Charlotte and Gareth. So just layers. I just try to stack layers and layers and give everybody internal conflicts and external conflicts to, because that's what we all have in real life. That's what we all have to deal with.
Oh no, for sure. And I had a buddy that just started your book the other day, and he got done with chapter 1. He was like, "Holy crap!" And I'm like, "Right?" I'm like, but and he had mentioned to me, something about Einar that I hadn't noticed before, and he's like, "Really, it starts." He's like, his struggles really start right off the bat, and I had thought back to it. I'm like, holy crap, like I said, I want to do a spoilers review for you for the book, just because there's so much I want to talk about with people. I know there's been quite a few people that have asked for it from Twitter and things, but he made a really good point. I'm like, I did not think of that, and I just thought that it was very interesting when I look back on him in particular. And yeah, he's I think he's my favorite character in your book. It's kind of hard for me to pick, I think, because I really do love Gareth. I really love what you did with Lucetta. I don't know. Most books you can pick, here's my top character. I feel like yours was really difficult because as you're going through, the book, like you said, there's different layers of, each character. And, as soon as somebody does something here, then you have another character that is going and excelling or, trying to deal with demons or, their problems and, their conflict. And I don't know, by the end, I was just like, who's my favorite character? I'm not quite sure.
And one of the other things I wanted to do was like, especially with the battles, it starts from one side and then the next chapter, it ends from another perspective. So like if you're reading it from the barbarian side, you're thinking that, the other side's the bad guys. But then when you start reading like a Gareth chapter, something, you're like, well, wait a minute, or a Madeline chapter, wait, the barbarians are probably the bad guys. So I want you to kind of pick and choose who the good guys are and who the bad guys are based on your own interpretation of the book.
And I think that personally, that worked really well because, again, I was going back and forth, and I was like, okay, at first I was like, okay, like, and I don't know if this was planned by you, but at first I was like, okay, like, I was like, here's this empire, I was like, and here these barbarians are coming in, destroying and killing people. And I was like, they're definitely the bad guys. And then later on, when you get more information, everything, I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe. And then I'm like, no, no, this empire, they're the bad guys. And I just kept going back and forth. And
well, I mean, that's kind of that's kind of how war is in real life. I mean, each side thinks they're the good guys. Each side thinks they're the good guys. And every villain is the protagonist in their own story, right?
No,
and that's what I tried to put into the book as much as possible to really give it that sense of realism.
No, I think it personally for me, it totally worked. Like I said, I'm a history teacher, and I was just like, man, I was like, this is exactly how, I would. And there's another author that the brothers Gwynn were talking about, totally gonna blank now, and I feel so bad, but it's the author of the Lonesome Dove series. And they talked about like, especially like how you get both sides of the conflict. And I've just always really liked that type of concept. And I just personally feel like a lot of people in fantasy don't do it very well. So that was, for me, it was one thing that I really liked about yours was, again, I got done with the book today and I'm like, I still don't know who the good guys or bad guys are. Like,
well, I mean, each side is going to do stuff that you agree with and disagree with, and it's only going to add to it. I mean, once book 2 rolls around, you're like, God, I mean, you're gonna be like, I still don't know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I gotta say, one of your tweets really like got me thinking, because you were like, oh, I really don't want to kill this character, but I might have to.
Yes.
And I was like, oh God. I was like, what's gonna happen? So I was like, and I feel like you already made me very apprehensive based off of different things you had done throughout the book, because you're like, it was almost like you did it Game of Thrones style. Like I didn't know. And those last like 60 pages, I was like really worried that, a character that I really liked was just going to die or something was going to happen to them. I just felt like there was so much conflict that had to be, resolved. And I wasn't sure, when you were going to resolve it, if it was going to be in this book and the next book. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And no spoilers for this video, but there were different things that you did that I was just like, holy crap. Like I was very surprised and I just didn't know what was going to happen next. And it really made me, keep wanting to read. So
and there's a lot of foreshadowing to a lot.
Yeah, you
it's
could
very
tell.
subtle, and sometimes it's only a sentence long, but there's going to be things that pop up in books 3 and 4 that you're going to look back and go, oh wow, that's from book 1. I remember that. So I planted a lot of little seeds in
cool.
book 1, a lot of them.
So this probably is a good time to mention to the audience that your Audible book just came out. So I will be getting that tonight to listen to tomorrow. So I'm actually glad you really said that, because now when I'm listening to it, the second time, you always get more meaning and, and recognize deeper things. So I'll actually be on the lookout more for those things. So maybe I can guess, and then later on when later on we can go back to that episode.
And I also did that to start up some discussion and speculation and everything, and get people talking about the book and what they think is going to happen with certain characters. I've had friends of mine tell me some pretty interesting theories they have about characters where I'm like, that's totally not what I'm going to do, but I can see why you would think that. So yeah.
It's kind of like Cobra Kai. Like I love that show, and my buddies and we always like to speculate what's going to happen in the next season. So there's a couple of people on Twitter that I've been talking about book 2 with and stuff. So I'm really anxious to get on those discussions with them. So I will be on the lookout in the Audible version though for a couple of different things. That actually, you kind of already mentioned it a little bit, but I know I've told you this before, I just really like how you have divided the chapters up. So for those in our audience, so Christopher in this book, The Hellborn King, he's divided up different chapters based off the perspective of different characters. And I feel like personally, I've read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. I do not know anybody else that has done that I've read at least. I really like that. How'd you come up with that idea in particular?
Well, for one, I'm really bad with names. So like,
welcome to the club.
I'm sitting there struggling. Like, how am I going to think of, I don't even know how many chapters are in the book, like 40 or something. I don't know. But I was like, how am I going to come up with like all these unique names for chapters? So naming the chapter after the character I actually got from George R.R. Martin.
Oh, okay.
It's very simple, because when you see the chapter, like Tyrion, you already know who it is. You're already in his head from the get-go. So why don't I do that? Because I know a couple other authors have done that where the chapter name is the character. So I was like, I feel like that would work best for me. It's going to solve, my name problem for one, and two, immediately it's going to put you right in that character's head. So that's why I decided to go that route.
Okay. And that actually makes me more excited to read George R.R. Martin. My buddy and I are, as soon as we get done with Wheel of Time, we're getting done with Malazan, Book of the Fall, and then Wheel of Time, and then we're actually going for Game of Thrones. So that actually makes me even more excited to read, because I actually really like the perspective that it brings. And I had never seen that before, and I was like, it really, I felt like it really added to the reading experience for me, and it really just, because I knew exactly what to expect from the perspective of that character, and it almost like put me in that mindset, and got me prepared for the tone, the conflict, and things like that. I think that it was, I'm flipping around a chapter right now to the front of my book, and then I'm going to put the next one. So I got the heroes, the conflict right away, and then I'm going to do chapter 3, the villain. But I just feel like that type of tone, and promise needs to be set. And I feel like you did that with how you split up your chapters.
Oh, thank you. Mission accomplished.
And I hadn't seen it done like that before. And I was like, okay. And I was, I think I was talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to the other day. One of the people I was interviewing, it was Miles Hurt. And Miles and I were joking. We're like, yeah, we're definitely going to have to steal that, because that just that worked really well. Because I had a friend years ago that talked about doing, I want to do this paladin, light paladin and dark paladin. And there's a lot of nuances and things that no one's ever done before that I've seen. But I thought about doing that type of thing beforehand. And I feel like you've convinced me, and especially doing just 2 characters. And then there's like another person. So there's only 3. but I like doing it from the thought of doing it from their perspective, and I just hadn't seen anybody do it efficiently, so I
Yeah, I
didn't
mean,
know
you
if it
could
would
even do
work.
like the character's name, and then like have an actual like name for the chapter, so
Yeah,
or something
yeah,
like that. Play around with it. Yeah.
yeah. And I just liked, because I wanted that type of thing where you get into that headspace right away, and the reader gets into that
Yeah.
headspace, and they're two very different characters. And I just was trying to think of how to do it, but I don't know. I'm surprised that I was only thinking like 2 characters, 3 max. I was just surprised that you know the level of characters you had did not suffer due to that, and I felt like it added to their characters and their chapters even more. So
Oh, thank you.
it definitely for me like really helped the pace a lot. And like I said, I've had just so much go on, like the fact that I got it done on Kindle at all because I'm a paperback guy. As I'm looking at all of my paperback books around
Yeah.
me, I just feel like, and coming back with work, it's just been nuts, and I've just had the craziest schedule. So for me to just pick right back up where I left off and feel like I didn't lose anything, I just think that it really shows what your pace was like. It was just really good, and I think a lot of that had to do with how you split up the chapters. So I personally really hope you stick with that, because I just think that your style and it match very, very well.
Oh, I plan on it. I'm already about a
Awesome.
third of the way done with the sequel. So,
Oh yeah. All right.
yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, again, you already mentioned kind of a little bit, and we talked about this previously before we got started, but just for our audience. So how did you go about, I'm thinking of like, I don't know, it's really hard for me when I think about this question. But how did you go about building such complex societies and social structures in book one? So this is book one. I feel like you did a lot in a little bit of time, and I know it's 40 chapters or whatever, but you built personally for me with the um this barbarian horde, but they, like you said, they have a, and from Madeline's perspective especially, later on where she meets them, I feel like you have a lot of, and Einar's perspective too, you have a lot of different clans, you have a lot of different tribes, they
Hmm.
each have their own social structure and class
Hmm.
structure. And I don't know, I just feel like you did a lot on that side. And then in terms of the Gareth and his family, I mean, you just built 2 completely different societies, and that really helped the conflict. But I was just curious how you went about both of those separately.
The answer is very anticlimactic. I just kind of did it as I went. I really didn't have any sort of game plan. I went from concept to completion in a year. So it was pretty much just figuring out as I went. I just started writing, and I can't even tell you how many times I threw out entire chapters. Just this is not going where I want it to. But like I'd mentioned earlier about the levels of conflict, I knew early on, like from the barbarian side, like I didn't want all the tribes to agree. I wanted it to be kind of a patchwork alliance where there's a lot of visible tension and conflict right on the surface. So that automatically gets you invested in, oh well, what's going to happen if things go south. And then from the Batanthian side, I don't want to say I kind of wanted to do just a stereotypical kingdom, but again, I wanted to break it down into layers. So like you have the Bethards, the ruling family, and then you have their commandants, which are their main lords. There's one in north, south, east, west, and within them, then you have all the lordlings and everything. So I just wanted layers, and you can kind of see in one of Gareth's chapters towards the end, you can kind of see conflict breaking out where there's a potential conspiracy brewing. So for me, the more layers, the more opportunities, the less chance of it getting stale, the less chance of the reader guessing what's going to happen. So that's pretty much just how I built it. Was make it as complex as you can without getting without writing yourself into a corner. And so I just went and just kept writing and writing, and what worked I kept, and what didn't just threw it out. So
I just feel like personally, I was discussing this with somebody the other day who had read your book, and I just personally feel like okay, so you have the one side, they're very civilized, they're very European, I guess you could say, very typical, fantasy, classical fantasy kingdom. But I feel like it worked for me so well because you showed the negative sides of that culture, and you showed their flaws rather than their strengths. And I feel like instead of saying here, I didn't think you were saying like here is the strong nation that can take on anything. I felt like it was almost like ancient Rome towards the end of its fall. And to me, it opened up like a whole new line of questions and, and anticipation. And then to see it, matched with the other side, of guys like Einar, and the different clans and tribes and that loose alliance. Yeah, it was just very interesting. And I liked how you had the different history between the two groups too. And without going into spoilers, guys, I just have to say, like, you're just going to have to read the book. I mean, it is a classical kingdom, I feel like, or empire, but you just do so many different things with it that to me it's new, and it's unique. And I feel like that's really hard to do with the type of, like as soon as I read chapter 1 and then 2, I was just like, okay, this is going to be different. And it wasn't your typical, Roman versus Germania type of novel, like that kind of fantasy setting kind of thing. And that's what I really liked about it. And yeah, I think you played the conflicts perfectly between the two cultures. And I guess I even feel silly saying two cultures because, you have even, within the empire, you have these different cultures, and coming about. And I was really happy to hear too of some of the different other countries and regions that you had brought up. So that to me added more of the world building without shoving it in your face. It was more subtle. I really liked that. It would kind of just felt like, particularly when you did it in the book, it felt like you opened up a gate, like you're like, okay, you got to this point in the book. Now we're going to open up a little bit more and, kind of reward you a little bit for the world building.
Right.
Yeah, but it was really good.
Yeah, like when we talked about before we went live here, I have a slightly different approach to world building where I don't just hammer you in the face with pages of exposition right off the bat. I pretty much just like to set the board. Here's where you're at. You're in the forest, and here's who's there, and here's what you're seeing and smelling, and then go. And then the scene just starts playing. The characters start doing their thing, and then I weave the world building and more of what's going on around into the dialogue in between what the characters are doing. So like you're not having to sit there and just slog through paragraph after page after page or whatever of just exposition. It really what I want to do, because I'm kind of scatterbrained and I have a hard time focusing like with reading. So I just wanted to write something that all right, here's where you're at, go, and it just takes off. Very easy to follow, the fast paced, and it is constantly engaging you too. So
And I think that's a great way to put it, is the book's constantly engaging.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm going to get through this person's chapter. And for instance, we were on a bus a couple weeks ago and coming back from an outdoor festival. And I was like, I'm going to get through this chapter. And then I blew through it. I'm like, okay, I'll get through this chapter and I'll do some work. And then, I got through probably like, 15, 20 chapters. And I was like, holy moly, I was like, and I was all of a sudden I had this huge dent in the book. But yeah, it's definitely engaging. And I just want you guys to know with Chris's style that, like now we had talked before we started recording. I'll say now, since we're recording, certain authors that I feel like everybody wants to be like now when it comes to dialogue. And there's two that I'm thinking. One in epic fantasy and one in grimdark. So you guys can take your pick. And now they used to be all exposition, right? Well, now we're all dialogue. And I really like yours because, like we talked about before we started recording, you're in between. You give a little bit of exposition, and then there's the dialogue. And then you give maybe more dialogue, then a little exposition. There's not too much of either one. It's right down the middle. I felt like it helped the pace. It helped the chapters. I didn't feel like I was being taught anything, but I learned a lot in the process. And I think that's really key for world building. And like I said, I'm struggling with that a bit. So it was nice to see somebody do it in a way that I like to read, which also to me, helps with a model for writing, and then finding my own style. So I definitely just wanted to point that out for the audience, because I think there's a lot of people like me who are like, we don't want all this exposition, but we also don't want all this dialogue. And yeah, I think more people should write like that and, try and go in between.
Yeah,
Definitely think your book's a lot better.
I try to walk that very fine line between being too descriptive and not descriptive enough, and that's probably the number one piece of feedback I get from people. Like I have friends that don't even read fiction at all, and I've had them read the book, and they're like, normally I wouldn't read something like this, but it just when I thought you were going overboard with the description and everything that's going on, you'd move on, and like my friend doesn't read fiction. He's like, that's why I liked it so much, because right when I thought, oh boy, this is going to start slogging on, nope, it shifts gears and it keeps going.
Yeah.
So, and that's just my style. I don't know how it happened. I didn't really try to do it that way. It's just how it came out.
Don't change. I really liked it.
No, I don't plan on changing.
It's like you and Rob Hayes with his Never Die. Definitely two of my favorite books within the last, I don't even know how long. I don't know. I really enjoyed the writing style. I enjoyed the pace. I really enjoyed both of your characters. That's what my friend the other day, he's like, what would you liken it to if you can't do grim dark? He goes, what would you liken it to, like who I've read recently? And he just got done with Never Die. And I'm like, Rob J. Hayes Never Die. I'm like, it's in between these things. I said, there's not a lot of exposition. There's also not a lot of dialogue dump, as like we like to call it. And he was like, okay. So I think he's about halfway done now. So he told me, you can't do the spoilers review until I finish. Cause he goes, I'm going to want to do something with it. And I think he's afraid that he's going to watch part of it and then it spoils. So I'm like, well, I'll wait till you're done. That we won't have to worry about it. But this last one here is really just about the book. And then I have a couple, just two personal questions for you. So what has been the hardest part when it comes to marketing this novel?
What hasn't been difficult?
There we go. That's an honest answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an agent. I'm self-published. My marketing budget is limited to my what my disposable income is. So basically, I've just been doing word of mouth from Twitter, and that's how I'm starting to build my following. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Mike at Music Books NFL on Twitter.
Oh, he's awesome.
He's awesome. He's a super fan. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him. But yeah, basically just word of mouth. I've been doing some book signing events locally, just to get engaged with people. A lot of success with that. But I'm just ground pounding. Just getting the word out, one person at a time, one book at a time. So I mean, I did want to originally go traditional. I tried for about 8 months to get an agent, over 50 rejections. I couldn't even get one agent to give me the time of day. So I was actually ready to quit in January of this year. Like I had the book finished and I got super depressed because I just could not get an agent. So I shelved it for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I worked too hard on this. I'm just going to do it myself. I'm going to, so I contacted an artist and a formatter. And within the span of 2 weeks, I had a physical copy in my hands from Amazon. And just holding that book, I was like, this is the path I'm meant to go. I'm meant to do this on my own. So, I mean, it's not easy. The expenses have been numerous doing this, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, we're really glad that you didn't quit because
yeah, me too.
I was just talking to Kelly McCall about this earlier today. Had a friend that wrote a book like you did, and then decided that it was too hard to query and things, and was doing it, and ended up deleting the book. And I felt like, I just felt like, and this is what Kelly had said. Kelly had tabled the original book for the first Fallen Blade, and R.L. Kingslayer is one of my favorite characters of all time now. And he said, he goes, I tabled it, wrote some other stuff, and then this agent, his agent at the time wanted something like his first it's like Assassin's Apprentice is what he called it, his first Kingslayer book, and he decided that he was going to redo the world building, this and that. And I said to him this morning, I was like, I'm so glad that you did not do what my friend did, because I needed that book when I read it. Especially, I was really struggling with writing, and I was struggling with fantasy a bit, and that one propelled me. And I can't imagine just deleting a book. I can imagine shelving and coming later, but Yeah. And and then it's funny that you say that, because that'd be two books that, really um, helped me get through really tough writing times in
Mhm.
particular. So really glad you didn't quit. Really glad you're going for
Yeah,
book
and
two.
I even tried writing something else too, and just saying, well, maybe this will see the light of day, maybe it won't. And I tried writing other stuff, completely. And the Hellborn King, that's just something in me said, that's the book you need to put out now. Is it perfect? No. I mean, like, a few typos slip past me. One of the perks about being self-published is that I can sneakily go back in and correct them without anybody noticing. But I mean, it's not a perfect book. It's not. It's a debut. I thought I did a pretty decent job at it. You are going to notice a big difference in book two in the writing quality. I'm a very fast learner, so my style is not changing. But you're like, when you read the first couple chapters in the book, you're gonna be like, whoa, this is like next level stuff. So I don't know, just something in me said, man, this is the book you need to put out, and you need to do it now, and just run with it. And that's what I've been doing all year long.
And I do want to say for our audience, regardless of what Christopher is saying, this book does not read like a debut novel.
Oh, thank you.
I have to say that like Michael R. Fletcher talks a lot about debut novels on the Wizards, Words and Words podcast that they run with the other guys. And he's always like, I hate those people, who write a debut novel and it's amazing. And I was like, oh, here's Christopher with his debut novel. Like, but like I said before we start recording though, I feel like reading your book, The Hellborn King, really has made me feel like, you know what? I can actually produce a book one. It'll be a lot of work, but I can actually produce a book one that people actually want to read, because
Mhm.
Christopher's done it. And I liken it to Les Brown, his motivational speaker from like the 80s and 90s. And I love him. And he talks about Roger Bannister writes the first one to break the 4-minute barrier for the mile. And, he talks about in his speech, like, how once you've known it could be done, you can do it too. And
Mhm.
I just feel like, I've talked to some other writers that are in my boat who haven't quite, gotten there yet, but we're getting there. And, they have also read your book and they feel the same way that I do, that, this can be done. An author who has not written a lot of books, but has written a lot, can really focus. And if they really focus all their time, attention, and love, they can actually come out with a really good debut novel.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I just want you to know that, you've given a lot of people in the writing community a lot of hope with their debut novel. So
That means the world to me. So thank you, and thank everybody out there for believing in this crazy idea that I came up with. And just I I can't believe here I am. I have a physical book, I have an ebook, I have an audio book, I have all these things, and I never thought it was going to happen. Never ever thought it was going to happen. And I owe it to you. I owe it to everybody else out there that's been spreading the word about it. Um, the reception that I've received so far is really what helps keep me going. Because there's days when I get so discouraged, I don't want to write. I'm just like, oh, I'm just wasting my time and my money, on this. But it's just all the love that I've been getting from the indie community. I mean, we're all small fries, in the grand scheme of things. But what I like about this indie book culture, you can call it, is that we're all building each other up.
yeah,
We
yeah.
all have small platforms, but we're all helping each other. We're all building each other up, and I love it. I love being a part of it.
Yeah, and that's where I had talked to somebody last. Oh, I was talking to Steve McHugh, and he's like, "Well, man, you share Christopher's book a lot." I said, "Don't worry, I'll share the Black Coat book that he just put out." And I've been trying to as much as possible. But I said, usually I share what I'm reading. But it's like I said to him, I said, "Well, I did tell Christopher, when he messaged me on Twitter, I said it is." Altruistic, but it is also selfish, because I really need you to sell more of this book so you can get me, at least 3 more, 4 more. So
Yeah, yeah,
I told him, I was like, really the people I like to read and like their books, I'm like, I want them to be successful so that they keep writing. I said, otherwise, who am I going to read?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
but yeah, it's. I definitely agree with you though. Me and Mallory Kuhn talked a couple weekends ago about, there was a, I don't know if you saw, I shared, but there was some poll that somebody shared that was like, do you think those in the indie community are enemies or allies? And her and I were like, what are you talking about? Enemies? Like,
No,
I
I
was
didn't see
like,
that, but yeah, it
yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm like, I don't see your book or any of your success, and I wish you all of it. I don't see any of it as deterring from mine at all. And like I said earlier, her and I talked about in our first interview that her and I had that we're about to post soon about, we feel like everybody rises together, and it was such a weird question and
Yeah.
concept. And we know some people do feel that way, but I feel like those people don't last very long in this community.
Mhm.
Which I
Yeah.
think is kind of a good thing, because we want everybody to, to help each other out. But yeah, it was very interesting. But
Mhm.
just these last two questions here. All right, so this is kind of hard for people if they didn't know I was going to ask, but we've had some great suggestions. What are some different authors or book suggestions that you have for our audience? This has been a favorite of some people.
Oh, so I'm going to completely blindside you by this. I'm actually not much of a book reader.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not, I had not picked up a book in general, especially a fantasy book, until I was about halfway done writing mine,
Oh, wow.
because I wanted to see how the pros did it. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I bought Name of the Wind, Way of Kings, Game of Thrones, the Blade itself. I bought a bunch of books and just kind of studying how they formatted, how they how they did it on a technical level.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've actually never really liked reading books. I've always been more of a writer, and I've always been a movie guy because I'm a much more visual.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I've been super into audiobooks. So I've listened to Song of Ice and Fire on audiobook, Joe Abercrombie stuff. I'm currently finishing up The Sandman, which is it's
Oh,
amazing.
man.
I
Yeah.
love it. Dude,
Classic.
Act Two is great. Love it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend The Sandman. Like, I wasn't
Oh,
familiar
yeah.
with the lore or anything of that nature. I just jumped in and started listening to it. I listened to the first one like 10 times and just got more and more familiar with what was going on. So Sandman would be my number one
That's a great
recommendation.
one. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then I'd say the biggest influence for me would be Game of Thrones, because like when I was watching the series and it ended, granted, I wasn't satisfied with how it ended, and that's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
whole other discussion for another time.
Oh, we
But
could do a 2-hour podcast
oh
about that
yeah,
alone.
oh yeah. But like when it ended, I was like, okay, well now what? Because there's never going to be like a cultural phenomena like this again. I
Yeah,
mean, granted,
yeah.
House of the Dragon's coming out, but I don't think it's going to have the same
Yeah, no,
impact.
no.
But I was like,
You only get one Matrix.
yeah, exactly. So I was like, I kind of want to do something like that myself and see if I could, be successful with it. So that's what really inspired me to do it. So as far as recommendations, I'd say Song of Ice and Fire and Sandman are my top two.
Oh man. So for those of you in the audience, like Christopher's saying, Sandman, my buddy and I think I got through the first four. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. We were studying them for a philosophy class
Mhm.
actually, and like you were saying, the mythology, the mythos, the breakdown of the philosophical conundrums. I mean, there's just so much there, and I'm actually glad you said that actually, because my buddy and I were talking about going through and book clubbing the graphic novels actually.
Mhm.
But yeah, they're phenomenal. If you guys haven't checked them out yet, you got to check them out. And they're actually doing a TV series now for that, and I'm
Yep.
actually really, really interested in that one. And I think it's also good that you bring it up though, because I just feel like some people think that you have to read all these fantasy books or the curriculum, as a
Mhm.
couple people and I call it. And I really don't think that's true. And I think you make a really good point. There are a lot of TV shows and visual components. Like, I love looking at fantasy art, and I
Mhm.
can write about, I used to take a piece of art and let RPG just write all day, about that character, that scene, or whatever I was thinking. And I think a lot of people, think that I don't read, so I can't write, and I really
Mhm.
don't think that's the case.
Not true at all.
Yeah,
At
I mean,
all.
look at your book. I mean,
Yeah.
you haven't read you've read some, right, but not the curriculum, so to speak.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, I did do a lot of research on like common tropes in fantasy and stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so I did a little bit of research going into this, but I no, I have not read stacks of books. I've barely read anything in my life, and here I am putting out books. So if anything in my book reminds you of something another author did, it's purely unintentional. I have no idea.
yeah,
I have no idea what any of these other authors are
yeah,
doing.
yeah.
So
It's funny that you
yeah.
said that, because Dirk Ashton was just talking about that, and I know he's talked about it before on their podcast. And with Michael R. Fletcher, Jed Hearn, and Rob J. Hayes. And it's funny because he people said he was a lot like Neil Gaiman, and he was like, they're like American Gods. He's like, I've never read American Gods. Then he went in, he was like, oh, these things are similar. He almost had like the same exact wording for different powers and things. So he had to go read some of that just to change it, just to make it, make it appear. But it was funny, because I just think it's funny that you mentioned that, because I do think, a good idea is a good idea. So, at the end of the day, so like I always wanted to do, instead of do my series called Legends of Uma, I wanted to call it Untold Legends. But then there was a video game called Untold Legends, and now they're a broken up company. It's a mess. I tried trying to find the rights and stuff, and my lawyer said it'd just be a pain. So I actually came up with a whole new name, which I like more now. But yeah, at the time I was like, wow, I was like, it's crazy to think of how many people come up with the same thing. But my friend goes, well, there's a lot of words in the English language, but at the same time, there's only so many words in the English language.
Exactly. and like whenever I come up with a name for something, like a clan or whatever, I always Google search it and I see if there's something similar. And if there is, it's just so then I got to throw it out and try to find something else. So I try to be as original as I can, but like you said, there's only so many words, there's only so many combinations, and kind of like music, everything's already been done already, so it's very hard to be unique. And in fact, I had one friend tell me, he's like, maybe this sort of story's been told before, but not the way you're telling it. The way you tell it is going to be different.
Well, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And I do want to mention like Jed Hearn was talking about this in their podcast recently. I think it was him that said it, and he made a good point, or it was Rev J. Hayes. They said people talked, like, think of like, Jesus or Luke Skywalker or King Arthur. He's like, people sat around campfires for thousands of years and told the same exact stories, but in a different way. And people keep wanting those types of stories. So I think your friend makes a really good point. And I think a lot of people really need to hear that, is you think that, there's an exercise I want to try where we actually, for one podcast, where Mark, Timmy, and I take ideas that people respond with through social media, give us the same story, and then we try to write like 1,000-word story with the same components, just to see that, what the differences are, and even do like the same characters, but don't talk about motivations and everything. And I guarantee it will come up with a completely different story, even having the same format and everything. The structure for characters and stuff. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting experiment, to say the least. But yeah, I think you make, you and your friend make a really good point there. So for this last one, obviously, you want to promote the Audible version of The Hellborn King. The book is sitting right there, and it just looks so good.
I know.
Somebody asked me the other day, they said, yesterday, they said, oh, you got done with it? Are you going to get a physical copy? I said, if you don't know by now, I'm getting a physical copy of that book. I said, we shouldn't be friends, you don't know me at all. But yeah, that's one heck of a book you have there. I really enjoy it. I'm really, looking forward to the Audible tomorrow. For sure on Twitter, I'll be cataloging my Audible experience as I go. So
I'll be retweeting every one of them. So
anything else that you have currently, or any deals or anything like that? Amazon store, anything like that?
I'm on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Google. You can download the ebook there. Audible, obviously. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and my website that looks like a 2005 MySpace page.
I liked it.
ChristopherGBrenning.com. Yeah, I'm not good at building websites. I might just hire somebody to do it. But that's where you can find me. So
perfect. Well, like I said earlier, Christopher, we'll be putting those in the description for you. Then we'll be sharing those around the next couple of weeks, that when this video pops out. I'm hoping to have the new calendar set actually this week, once my coaching season is done. We're filming out a little bit in advance here, guys, but by the time you'll see this, hopefully you guys have already looked at my Twitter or the Facebook page or my website and picked up either a physical copy or Amazon copy or an Audible copy of The Hellborn King. Me and Christopher want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. You can find this video and our other videos on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And actually, the audio on Spotify will be up there by the time you guys see this. Feel free to reach out to us at Scholars of Uma, that's UMA, @gmail.com. Let us know who you'd like to see on future podcasts, any questions you have for those guests, any topics you want us to go over. Feel free to send us videos and pictures that are fantasy and sci-fi related. We'll show those on our social media. Christopher, want to thank you again, for, talking to me so much on Twitter and coming today. Obviously, the invitation's always open if you ever want to come back and, discuss the Hellborn King more, or any, other ideas, or, especially once you go, get book 2 done and ready to, promote that. We'd love to help you out as much as possible. Love the book, obviously. So going to be sharing this, as many times as I can. That way, people go and buy your book, and that way I get book 2, 3, and 4. So.
All right. Thanks for having me. I had a great time. And I'm going to let you know right now, look for the cover art for book 2 after the new year.
Oh, yeah. Right. So I'm going to be putting that on my Google Calendar right after we get done, actually.
Well, I'm about 95% set on a name, but I need to let it marinate a little bit more. But when I do come up with it, you're going to be the first to know.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really exciting. That's kind of the lull in the year too, I feel like, for me, for school and stuff. So I always like things like that. And I'm not a winter guy, so that actually helps me out a lot. So that's going to be really exciting. All right, Chris.
I'll come back whenever you want. So
Perfect. Well, as soon as I get my updated calendar, we'll get something on the books for sure for the winter or spring. Excellent. Well, Christopher, obviously, I'll see you later. I'll talk to you on Twitter, I'm sure, a little bit later or tomorrow, and hope you have a good rest of the evening. And I will talk to you soon, my friend. Hope you have a good rest of the night.
Yep, you too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.